The soft trill of a violin danced through the air as sunlight bathed the rolling countryside in a golden hue. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves, sending flickers of light across the white chairs filled with smiling guests. Beneath a lace canopy of hanging wisteria, everything looked like a dream pulled straight from a storybook. Emily stood at the edge of the moment she had planned for months, dressed in ivory satin, her veil gently swaying with the wind. Laughter floated, champagne clinked, and the air buzzed with the kind of joy only weddings bring. Yet, even as her lips curved into a polite smile, a quiet thrum of unease beat beneath her ribs. Her fingers gripped the bouquet a little too tight, her chest rising and falling in short, nervous breaths. No one noticed it, but Emily did. Behind the grand oak doors of the estate's chapel, Emily stood frozen. The music cued the next step the moment she was to walk down the aisle, but her feet felt like stone. Her maid of honor whispered encouragement. Her father offered a steady arm, but she barely heard them. Something was wrong. It wasn't fear. It wasn't cold feet. It was something deeper, a void that had never quite healed, the kind that lingers even on days painted in perfection. Her eyes fluttered shut, and without realizing it, her mind wandered not to James, her groom, but to a pair of deep brown eyes, a rough, warm nuzzle, and a tail that once wagged just for her, just as the pianist struck the first chord of Canon in D. A piercing bark rang out across the open meadow. It was sharp, urgent. The crowd stirred, turning their heads in confusion. Whispers rose from the front rows. The officiant paused, his words catching in his throat. Emily's heartbeat stilled, her breath caught. It wasn't the kind of bark that came from a distant farm dog or some neighborhood mutt. It held something, raw, familiar, like a memory she hadn't let herself revisit in years. For a moment, the music faltered, and all that could be heard was the rustling of trees and the quiet murmur of disbelief. From the line of tall oaks bordering the meadow, a figure emerged, slow, deliberate, a German shepherd, dusty and thin, with a limp in its front leg and eyes too old for its body, walked straight out of the forest's shade and into the light. Each step seemed to cost it something, but it didn't falter. Its gaze was steady, focused. The guests rose from their seats, gasping in hushed amazement. Phones were lowered. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. The dog kept walking, right down the grassy aisle meant for Emily, past white petals strewn by a child moments before, past the flower arch, past the stunned groom. It walked toward something. No someone. Emily's eyes locked on the dog, and her bouquet slipped from her trembling hands. Her breath hitched as a flood of memories came crashing back. Nights, wrapped in blankets by the fireplace, muddy paws on kitchen tiles, a warm head resting on her lap through heartbreaks. "Scout," she whispered, her voice so quiet no one else could hear. Tears welled in her eyes as the weight of years collapsed inside her. Scout had vanished 3 winters grown off during a storm and never returned. She searched for weeks, posted signs, walking miles, grieved, but now here he was, tattered but alive. Somehow, here. James called her name, confused, but she didn't respond. She only took one slow step forward, tears streaking down her cheeks. The world fading except for the dog limping toward her. Scout stopped just feet away, lifting his tired head as if recognizing her scent, her spirit, the same way he had every time she came home late from school. Emily knelt down slowly, unable to hold back a sob. He didn't bark again. He didn't whine. He just stared into her, and she into him, two souls broken and reuniting after years of quiet mourning. Somewhere behind her, the music had long stopped. This wasn't how the day was supposed to go, but in that moment, with the smell of the meadow and the weight of years between them, Emily realized. Maybe this was exactly how it was meant to begin. The rain pounded against Emily's windshield as the storm raged, the howling wind making it nearly impossible to see through the dense downpour. She gripped the steering wheel, heart racing as the road twisted and turned. A flash of lightning illuminated the dark landscape, revealing something that made her breath catch in her throat. There, along the shoulder of the road, was a soaked, trembling German shepherd, limping on 3 legs, a pitiful sight in the middle of the storm. Emily's heart shattered for the creature as she pulled her car over to the side, the tires skidding on the wet pavement. She quickly threw it in park and ran toward the dog, her shoes slipping in the mud, but she didn't care. All that mattered was getting to the dog. The animal flinched at her approach, its eyes wide with fear. The storm seemed to intensify, the gusts of wind carrying the smell of wet earth and desperation. Emily reached out a hand, speaking softly, but the dog recoiled, unsure of her intentions. She paused, her heart breaking. She couldn't leave him out here, not like this. With a gentle, steady motion, Emily crouched down to the dog's level, offering her hand in peace. Her voice was calm, a quiet whisper amidst the howling wind. "Hey there, it's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." Slowly, the dog's eyes softened, and after a tense moment, he hesitantly took a step closer. The trembling dog was cold to the touch, his fur matted and wet from the storm. Emily took off her coat, wrapping it around him as best she could. She could feel his ribs, his exhaustion, the sheer weight of the hardships he'd endured alone. His body tensed when she touched him, but as she gently rubbed his back, he let out a sound of cautious relief. Emily offered him a bag of crackers she had in her purse, her hands shaking as she tore it open. His eyes fixed on the food, and he took the smallest, most tentative bite. She smiled, her eyes filling with tears. It was the beginning of something she hadn't expected, a connection that went beyond words, beyond any sense of logic. As she led him to her car, Emily tried to calm her racing thoughts. The storm was relentless, but the dog, her new companion, was finally safe. "You need a name," she murmured, her voice soft as she gently petted him. His eyes met hers, full of trust and uncertainty. "Max," she whispered, watching him closely. "You're Max now." Max's ears perked up at the sound of his new name, and for the first time since Emily found him, there was a flicker of recognition in his eyes. He was still scared, but Emily could sense that he was beginning to trust her, just a little. She carefully set him in the back seat, watching as he lay down, exhausted, his breathing deep and even. The drive back to her home was quiet, the storm continuing to rage outside. Emily glanced at Max in the rearview mirror, her heart full of hope. He wasn't alone anymore. As weeks passed, Max became her constant companion, a source of comfort through the darkest moments of Emily's life. Her world had felt like it was unraveling. Her breakup with Luke, the sudden death of her father, the loneliness that gnawed at her every night. But through it all, Max stayed by her side, a steady presence of love and loyalty. There were days when Emily would curl up on the couch, tears staining her cheeks, and Max would nuzzle her, his soft fur brushing against her skin as if to say, "I'm here, you're not alone." His deep, soulful eyes were filled with understanding, and as she rested her head against his, she felt his warmth seep into her very being. No words needed to be spoken. Max understood her pain, and in his silent way, he healed her. The bond between them grew stronger each day, a quiet companionship that spoke volumes. One beautiful spring afternoon, Emily decided to take Max for a hike in the woods. She hoped it would be a peaceful escape, a way to clear her mind. The trees swayed gently in the breeze, and birds chirped merrily in the distance. Max trotted beside her, his tail wagging in delight. But then, a sudden movement caught Max's attention. His ears perked up, and before Emily could even react, he bolted toward the underbrush, chasing after a deer. "Max, no," Emily called, panic rising in her chest. She ran after him, her breath ragged as she sprinted through the woods, calling his name, but the sounds of the forest swallowed her cries. Max didn't return. The minutes stretched into hours as Emily searched the woods, calling out for him until her voice was hoarse. But there was no sign of him. The sun began to dip below the horizon, and Emily's heart sank as the reality set in. Max was gone. For weeks, Emily didn't stop searching. She printed flyers, posted on social media, and drove through the nights, hoping for a glimpse of Max. Each lead turned cold, and each empty road only deepened her sense of loss. Her life seemed to be a hollow echo of what it had been. She still remembered the warmth of his fur, the soft sound of his breathing as he lay next to her at night. She missed him more than words could describe. There were moments when she thought she could still feel his presence beside her, like a shadow in the corner of her eye. But no matter how much she longed to find him, the truth was becoming harder to accept. Max might never return, but Emily had learned to live with the pain. She went through the motions of daily life, but every quiet moment was filled with the absence of Max. She kept a small picture of him by her bedside, a constant reminder of the love and connection they had shared. Though the grief lingered, Emily slowly began to heal, allowing herself to move forward, but never forgetting. Max's memory was woven into the fabric of her life, like a thread that could never be pulled away. It was at her wedding that Emily's world would change once again. The ceremony was held in an open field, surrounded by her closest friends and family. Luke, the man she had once loved, stood at her side, his smile warm and full of pride. Everything felt perfect, yet there was an emptiness inside Emily, a sense that something was missing. That was when she saw him. A lone dog appeared on the edge of the field, limping slightly, his coat wet from the dew. Emily froze. Her heart skipped a beat as she recognized the familiar, haunting scar on his ear. The way he moved, the way he seemed to scan the crowd. It was Max. Emily's breath caught in her throat as their eyes met across the field. Time seemed to stand still. The dog's eyes were filled with recognition, and Emily felt a jolt of electricity pass through her body. He hesitated, his gaze never leaving hers, and then he took a tentative step forward. Her voice broke through the silence. "Max," she whispered, barely believing it. Her heart pounded in her chest as she took a step forward, her eyes never leaving his. And then, just like that, Max sprinted toward her, his body shaking with excitement. His tail wagged furiously, and his eyes sparkled with joy. He leaped into her arms, and Emily's heart shattered with happiness. She held him tight, her tears mixing with the rain that had begun to fall again. The moment they were reunited felt like the entire world had paused to witness the joy and love between them. Max's limp echoed through the quiet of Emily's home as she guided him inside. Every step seemed laborious, his body battered, scarred, and trembling from the ordeal he'd endured. His eyes, once full of life, now held only traces of fear, confusion, and vulnerability. He didn't know what to expect, but Emily wasn't any different. The sight of his injuries tore at her heart, but it was the overwhelming sense of responsibility that gripped her that this was her mission now, to help him heal. Gently, she led him to the small rug by the fireplace, her hands trembling as they brushed his fur. "Don't worry, Max," she whispered softly, as if assuring herself more than him. "You're home now, you're safe." As she sat beside him, she noticed how his body flinched at her touch. Every muscle in his form seemed to bristle with caution, and in that moment she understood just how deep the scars of his past were, both physical and emotional. The house was quiet, but the stillness only made Emily's heart ache. She lay awake, her arm draped over Max, her voice barely a whisper. Every now and then he shuddered in his sleep, whimpering softly. It was as though his mind was still trapped in whatever horrors he'd known before. "I'm here," she murmured, pressing her cheek against his. "You're safe now. No one's going to hurt you." But the comfort didn't come easily. She could feel the tension in his body, the tremors that shook him from deep within. It was a long night for both of them, a night of unspoken fears and quiet companionship. The sterile smell of the vet's office lingered in the air as Emily sat beside Max, who lay quietly on the examination table. His once vibrant fur had dulled, and his eyes, while alert, still held that distant, haunted look. The vet paused as he scanned Max's medical records, his expression faltering for a brief moment before he looked up. "It's Max, the vet," said, his voice carrying the weight of the revelation. "He's a survivor." Emily's heart skipped. It wasn't just a confirmation, it was a deeper understanding of what Max had endured. She sat there for a moment, overwhelmed before her. Fingers gently stroked his head. "We'll get through this together," she promised, her voice thick with emotion. The vet's words hung in the air, carrying the weight of the past and the hope for what was to come. It was as though he had been through hell and come out the other side, and now so would she. As the days passed, Emily found herself slowly reshaping her life around Max's needs. She was meant to be on her honeymoon, a celebration of a new chapter with Luke. But as she looked at Max, eyes full of pain and trust, her priorities shifted. She couldn't leave him, not now, not when he was so fragile. Luke understood, even if the disappointment lingered in his eyes. "It's okay," he said, his voice quiet. "He needs you more than I do right now." She could see the silent sacrifice in his words, the weight of the unspoken. It wasn't easy, but it was the right thing. She chose Max's healing over a honeymoon because in that moment, she knew what mattered most. Luke watched Emily with a mixture of admiration and uncertainty. He tried to smile, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. He understood the bond she had with Max, but he couldn't help but feel the subtle shift in their dynamic. They had just begun their life together, but now, Emily's focus was on Max and, rightfully so. "I just want what's best for both of you," he said one night, his voice quiet as he sat beside her. Emily turned to him, her gaze softening. "Luke, this is our life now. I'm not choosing Max over you, ... I'm choosing both of you. We'll figure this out together." It was a promise, one that brought them closer, but still, the unease lingered. Would their marriage be able to survive this new chapter, or was this the beginning of something neither of them fully understood yet? The storm had rolled in unexpectedly, and the deafening crack of thunder sent Max into a panic. His body froze, eyes wide with fear, and before Emily could react, he dove under the bed, his whole body trembling. Emily followed without hesitation. She crouched beside him, running a hand along his trembling body, her voice soft and soothing. "It's okay, Max. I'm here. You're safe." Max didn't move, his body still rigid with fear. It wasn't just the storm, it was everything that had led up to this. Emily knew his fears ran deeper than a simple thunderstorm, but in that moment, all she could do was offer him what comfort she could. She lay beside him, her arm wrapped around him protectively, and together they rode out the storm. Days passed, and Emily found herself speaking to Max more and more, not just as a caretaker, but as a friend. She spoke to him in the quiet moments when they were alone, recounting stories of her past, her childhood, the things that had shaped her into who she was. "You know," she said one day, as she scratched behind his ears, "my dad always used to tell me stories. He had this way of making everything feel like an adventure." Max listened, his head resting on her lap, as though he understood every word. And in those moments, it felt like he did. Their bond deepened, not just through the act of healing, but through shared memories. The kind of memories that created a connection beyond just the present moment. Emily had never forgotten that day, the one that had defined the unspoken bond between her and Max. It had been the day her father had passed away. She had been lost, consumed by grief, but Max had been there, steadfast and loyal. Even as her father's casket was lowered into the ground, Max sat by her side, his presence unwavering. He didn't move, he didn't flinch, he simply sat there, watching over her, never once leaving her. The memory flooded her mind, tears welling in her eyes as she stroked his fur, now healed and soft once again. "You saved me that day," she whispered, choking back emotion. "And now I'm here to do the same for you." It was more than just love. It was a bond forged in the fires of pain and loss, one that neither time nor tragedy could ever break. Every night after Max had settled into bed, Emily sat down to write. It wasn't to anyone, not really. The letters were a form of therapy, her own way of working through her thoughts and emotions. But in each letter, she wrote as though Max were the only one who could understand. "I don't know if I'm doing this right," she wrote one night, "but I want you to know that you're not alone anymore. You're safe, and I'm not going anywhere." She never expected anyone to read those letters. They were just for Max, just a way to pour her heart out, to remind herself of the promise she'd made to him. It was a simple gesture, one that brought a smile to Emily's face. When she opened the door that morning, there he was, Max tail wagging, a book in his mouth, looking at her with those eyes that seemed to hold so much understanding. "You remember this?" she asked, her voice soft with surprise. Max wagged his tail even faster, as though saying, "Of course, I remember." It was as though a small piece of their old bond had been restored. Max wasn't just surviving anymore. He was beginning to heal, to trust again. And for Emily, that was everything. That evening, as Emily sat on the couch, Max walked up to her and, for the first time, wagged his tail. It was slow at first, tentative, like he wasn't sure if it was safe to hope again. But as she reached out to him, he wagged a little harder, his eyes filled with a new light. It wasn't much, but it was everything. It was the beginning of something beautiful, something unspoken but deeply understood between them, a symbol of his healing heart and hers. Just as things seemed to settle into a peaceful routine, the unease crept back in. A shadow loomed just outside their bubble of healing a presence that threatened everything they'd worked for. Max sensed it first. Growling at the door, his body tense with warning. Emily paused, her heart racing. Something wasn't right. Max's single quotes growl grew louder, more urgent, as Emily slowly walked toward the door. She hesitated for a moment before pulling it open, her breath catching in her throat when she saw it. A flyer, tacked to the door, bearing the picture of a German shepherd. Max's twin, the same eyes, the same stance, and under it, the words she feared. Missing, her heart stopped. Max's past had just come knocking. Emily stood frozen in the small cafe where she had been grabbing a cup of coffee. Her fingers trembled as she held the flyer in front of her, the words leaping off the page, each letter cutting through her chest. Max was on it. The flyer didn't just list him as lost, it claimed he belonged to someone else. The photo, grainy but unmistakable, showed a dog that looked just like him, his soulful eyes staring back at her. Max, she whispered, breath catching. The room around her blurred. A rush of disbelief surged through her. No, this couldn't be happening. He'd been with her for over a year. They were a family. She had saved him. He was her dog, her friend, her protector. The fear twisted in her gut, suffocating her. What was going on? The name on the flyer rang a bell. It wasn't just the face of a man claiming Max. It was the face of a man who had a reputation, one Emily wished she didn't know. She dug deeper, the shock building as she read article after article about the dark, sordid past of the man who once owned Max, Aaron Dunlap. The words illegal dogfights and raid jumped from the screen, a dark shadow settling over. Her heart, Max had escaped during a police raid. The horror of it, all the fear Max must have felt made Emily's blood run cold. He'd been abused. He'd been forced to fight. And now this man was trying to take him back. How could she possibly let that happen? Emily walked into the shelter, her mind racing, a sense of dread curling in her chest. Standing at the counter, she found him, Aaron Dunlap, cold, calculated, and unbothered by the toll it had taken on the dog he'd once abused. He had the legal papers in his hand, the sharp edges of the documents cutting through the air. He knew he was in the right. He was determined to take Max back. His voice was smooth, confident, like a man who had never lost a battle. "Be taking him," he said, his gaze never wavering from Emily's face. She felt her knees shake, the world spinning as he walked toward her with all the authority in the world. How could this be happening? Max had no chip, no tattoos, nothing that could definitively say he was hers, other than the bond they had forged over time. Emily could feel the walls closing in on her. She had Max's collar, an old tag that was worn, but it didn't seem enough. The tag had no proof of ownership, just a small reminder of their time together. She could barely hold on to it as Aaron's gaze drilled into her. The man had his legal papers. He had his authority. Emily, though, had only her love for Max. But love didn't seem to be enough in the cold reality of the law. Max, who had always been calm and collected, was now pacing, his paws clicking softly against the cold floor of the shelter. He whined, low and urgent, his eyes flicking from Emily to the man. It was as if he understood what was happening, understood that something was terribly wrong. The protective, loyal animal that had once run into Emily's arms now seemed uncertain. His eyes darted between her and Aaron, filled with confusion and fear. "Please don't take me back there," Max seemed to plead silently. Emily felt her heart shatter as she watched him, realizing how deep their connection truly ran. This wasn't just about ownership, it was about survival, and Max was scared. She was scared too. Hours later, Emily sat at home, Max curled up on the couch beside her. The doorbell rang, and her heart skipped a beat. She opened the door, only to find Erin standing there again, but this time he wasn't alone. A police officer flanked him, and in his hand he carried a stack of stamped legal documents. "This is official," the officer said, his voice hard. Emily's stomach dropped. She looked down at Max, who had perked up at the sound of the officer's voice. He didn't know what was happening, but Emily could feel the familiar, dangerous tension building between them. Was this the end? Emily's mind raced. She wasn't going to give up without a fight. She stepped in front of Max, her body a shield, her hands trembling as she tried to keep her voice steady. "No," she said, barely above a whisper. The officer's eyes flicked between the papers and Emily's face. "You can't take him," she repeated, her voice stronger now, laced with desperation. Her heart beat loudly in her chest as she pressed her body against the doorframe, refusing to let them in. The officer sighed, glancing at Erin, who was smirking behind him. Emily's legs shook, but she stood tall. "I won't lose him," she thought, even as the weight of the situation pressed down on her. Then it happened. Max growled, a low, menacing sound that echoed in the room, unlike anything Emily had ever heard before. The officer stepped back, startled, but it was Erin's shout that truly made the dog lunge. "Get away from me," Erin yelled, and that was when Max sprang forward, teeth bared, his fur bristling with all the terror and rage that had been pent up inside him for so long. As he lunged, the fabric of his coat shifted, and Emily's eyes caught something a scar, long and jagged, just above his shoulder, a scar that only one person could have given him. Emily's heart stopped. She knew that scar. It was Erin's. Doing Max had been hurt by this man, and now, in this moment of fury and recognition, he was finally fighting back. Emily gasped, her breath catching in her throat. This was it. She had to win this fight for him. In a frenzy of emotion, Emily dashed to her desk and grabbed her journal. She flipped it open, the pages flying in her hands as she searched for something, anything to prove that Max belonged to her. Photos of him as a puppy, his first vet visit, the adoption papers. She found everything, each piece a testament to the life they had built together. Her hands shook as she pulled out vet bills with dates, receipts for food, photos of their time in the park. She held the journal tightly, almost pleading. This has to be enough. Max's life with her was real. Their bond was real. Just as Emily was about to break, a voice rang out from next door. A neighbor, Mrs. Ellis, stood at the door, her face filled with recognition. "That's Emily's dog," she said firmly, her voice cutting through the tension. "I remember when he came back from the shelter. You can't take him." Emily's breath caught in her throat. Mrs. Ellis had witnessed the moment Max had come into their lives. She had seen the bond form, the healing that had taken place. Her voice was the final piece of the puzzle, the proof that Emily was not alone in this fight. With her words, the atmosphere shifted. Erin's confident smirk faltered. The walls were closing in on him. Erin's face drained of color as he realized the game was over. The proof was irrefutable. The tension, which had once seemed like an immovable force, evaporated. He didn't say a word. With one last glance at Max, he turned on his heel, his footsteps echoing as he walked away, defeated. The police officer followed him out, and the door shut with a soft thud. Emily exhaled slowly, her legs giving way beneath her as relief flooded her system. Emily collapsed to her knees, pulling Max close as tears streamed down her face. She buried her face in his fur, sobbing uncontrollably. Max licked her face, his body still tensed from the ordeal, but he was safe. He was hers. The officer, standing silently by the door, gave her a quiet nod, a sign of approval and understanding. Emily held Max tight, never wanting to let him go. Again, they had been through the storm together, and now they were finally free. Emily's hands trembled slightly as she filled out the form at the vet's office, the pen poised above the paper. Max, now calm and secure in her arms, watched the receptionist with his big, trusting eyes. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind, but today everything felt right. She carefully noted down his details and then handed the form over. Max's microchip will ensure he never gets lost again, the vet said, gently inserting the small chip just beneath his skin. Emily felt a quiet relief wash over her. It wasn't just a precaution, it was a promise. As she stood up, Max, who had been squirming anxiously through most of the process, looked up at her with a new sense of calm. This was the final step in ensuring that nothing would ever separate them again. Weeks passed, and Emily and Luke began to feel like their lives had been truly redefined by the arrival of Max. They'd been through so much together, the fear of losing him, the anxiety of his uncertainty. But now, with every wag of Max's tail and every deep sigh of contentment, Emily and Luke were growing closer, not just as a couple, but as a family. They'd experienced the same fear and relief, each moment strengthening their bond. At night, when the world was quiet, Emily would often hear Luke whispering to Max, calling him our miracle, and she would smile, her heart full. Max had been a bundle of nervous energy when he first arrived, always pacing, never truly relaxing. It was as if he was waiting for the other shoe to drop, expecting that the safety he'd found with Emily and Luke would be fleeting. But now, after months of love, care, and reassurance, Max has found peace. Emily would catch him sleeping, his body relaxed in a deep slumber, his paws twitching as if he were dreaming of running free, and she knew he was finally safe. Max, once skittish and uncertain, was learning to trust that he had a forever home. The school year was in full swing, and Max had become a regular visitor at Emily's school. The children adored him, running up to greet him the moment he appeared. His tail wagged non-stop as he soaked up the love and attention, making friends with every student he encountered. There was something about his calm demeanor and gentle nature that put everyone at ease. Emily watched in awe as Max became more than just a pet. He was a bridge to every child's heart, offering them comfort, joy, and a reminder of the simple beauty of unconditional love. Every day, when the bell rang and the children flooded out to the yard, Max was there to greet them, his joyful barking filling the air. It was during a school assembly, months after the reunion, that Emily found herself standing at the podium, Max by her side, as she shared their journey. Her voice cracked as she recounted the terrifying days when Max had been lost and the overwhelming joy when he was found. She told the audience about the nights she'd stayed awake, her heart aching with the thought of never seeing him again. As she spoke, Max stood patiently at her feet, his head held high, his gaze fixed on the crowd. The room was silent, the weight of her words felt by everyone. After the assembly, Emily posted their story online, sharing it with the world, and within hours, it went viral. Thousands of people reached out, telling their own stories of lost pets and reunions. Emily's post reminded them that hope was never truly lost. Sometimes it just took a little longer to be found. Motivated by the overwhelming support and the emotional journey she'd been on, Emily knew she had to give back. She started volunteering at a local animal rescue center, helping care for injured and scared animals who needed a second chance. Max, who had once been the one in need, now became a calming presence for the others. His gentle nature and unwavering loyalty gave hope to the scared and anxious animals, and his quiet companionship became a healing force. Emily saw how much the rescue dogs appreciated his presence. Max wasn't just a pet anymore. He was a symbol of survival, resilience, and the power of love to heal. It was their first wedding anniversary, and Emily and Luke knew they had to celebrate it in a meaningful way. They drove to the field where they had first found Max, the same place where they had heard the desperate barking that had led them. To him, as they walked with Max by their side, Emily's heart swelled with emotion. It felt like a lifetime ago that they had been uncertain about their future, unsure of what was to come. But now they stood there together, their family complete. Max ran ahead of them, his tail wagging high in the air as he bounded through the grass. The joy in his eyes was undeniable. Emily and Luke watched him with tears in their eyes, realizing that this was home. Max had finally found his place in the world, and so had they. It was a full circle moment, one that solidified the fact that the love and loyalty they had shared with Max was unbreakable, and their family was now complete. Emily sat quietly by the window, watching Max sleep soundly on his favorite blanket. She gently stroked his fur, the softness beneath her fingers grounding her. It still amazed her how one small animal could transform her world so completely. The quiet, comforting presence of Max reminded her daily of the power of loyalty and love. The love he gave was a constant, never asking for anything in return. Yet it was everything she had ever needed. She never could have predicted how much he would change her life. She closed her eyes, remembering the long months when Max was lost. The pain was unbearable at times. Day that passed, she felt the sting of not knowing if he was still out there, waiting for her, or if she'd ever find him again. But through that heartache, Max taught her the hardest lesson of all: patience. Sometimes, love isn't about instant gratification. It's about holding on when all you can do is wait. It was in that waiting that Emily found the deepest form of trust, not just in Max, but in herself. The day Max came home wasn't just a miracle. It was proof that love could transcend time and distance. Emily looked at him now, with his familiar, soulful eyes, and knew deep down that he had never truly been lost. Their bond had been there all along, quiet but strong, bridging the months of silence between them, even in the time they spent apart. Max's love had never wavered, had only grown, waiting for the moment to return. In a way, Emily realized he had been with her all along, even in his absence. The journey of losing Max, and then finding him again, had changed Emily in ways she hadn't expected. In the depths of her grief, she discovered a strength she didn't know she had won, born from the vulnerability of loving something so completely. She learned compassion on a level she'd never known before, and a sense of purpose emerged. From the ashes of her despair, Max had taken her through a storm, but in doing so, he'd given her more than just companionship. He'd shown her the depth of her own heart. Max had come from nowhere, lost and alone, with no clear path forward. But Emily had realized that, in some ways, Max had always known his way back to her. Dogs don't care about time or distance, they follow a pull, a guiding thread that leads them to the hearts of those they love. The way he found his way back to her wasn't just a coincidence. It was love, raw and unyielding, finding its way home. And when Emily thought about it, she knew that love had no map, no set rules. It simply knew where to go. Emily sat with Max in her arms, feeling his steady breath against her skin. There was a truth she had come to realize after all these years. Dogs don't just take your love, they carry it with them, through every mile, through every challenge, through every heartbeat. Max had never truly left her, even when he was lost. His love for her was constant, a silent promise. Emily had given him her heart, but in return, he had given her so much more. He had made her feel that her heart would always be found, no matter how far apart they were. In the end, love like Max's never fades, it stays, and it always finds its way home.